Hi, good afternoon. It's Kevin Martin, your UT admissions guy. I've been doing some reading over the winter holidays, and I wanted to share with you 4 books that I find to be particularly illuminating, both about college admissions, but this broader conversation about higher education, and specifically, who are the types of students that go on to succeed in college versus those who fall through the cracks. The first book I want to talk about is one that was published in 2015 by a frequent contributor to the New York Times named Frank Bruni. He wrote this book, Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, An Antidote to the College Admissions Mania. And I love the subtitle here because Bruni's right, college admissions is totally insane. So I'm a moderator on the Reddit community called Applying to College. And on Applying to College, it's sort of like an alternative to College Confidential for those of you who have been exploring internet communities to talk about college admissions. And on Applying to College, so many of these students are so anxious and so neurotic and so obsessed with getting into top 25 universities or even, flagship public schools like the University of Texas or Michigan or Washington. And it's all in the title here. Bruni, he says that literally where you go to college is not all that big of a deal. And he looks at a lot of different myths and misconceptions about the Ivy League, for example, or how, those years between 18 and 22 are going to define, who you are. Bruni's argument is a sound one where he says it's not really where you go to school, but how you do once you get there. I reflect back on my own experiences. I attended a high school where not that many students went on to college. The only university I applied to was the University of Texas at Austin. There weren't any conversations about early action or wait lists or SAT and ACT prep. I just didn't come from that sort of environment. And though college admissions, and especially UT, has become more competitive over the last 10 years, my best piece of advice, and I have these conversations every day, is just to kind of calm down. Don't worry about it so much, please just go and enjoy high school. Another book I want to talk about is called The Gatekeepers, Inside the Admissions Process of a Premier College, by a journalist named Jacques Steinberg. This is a really interesting book that was actually given to me by a family friend. It was published about 15 years ago, and again, the college admissions landscape has changed from now and from now between now and 15 years ago. But Steinberg has kind of an all-inclusive access to Wesleyan College, which is a small liberal arts college in the Northeast. And it really humanizes the college admissions process because he looks at kind of the full range of all the different players that are involved. And so he follows some students who are applying to Wesleyan, what their online presence is like. He kind of shadows an admissions reviewer who works at Wesleyan, as well as kind of telling the stories of how, these professionals become college admissions officers. And he also makes a very interesting observation where college admissions is very imperfect. It's prone to human error. There's a lot of subjectivity, implicit bias. And he really kind of breaks this misconception that college admissions is some kind of objective process. It simply isn't, especially when you're dealing with universities that admit less than 15% of the students that apply. There's going to be a lot of kind of ambiguity of how universities actually make and render decisions. And so I highly recommend that you read The Gatekeepers by Steinberg because it will kind of give you a different perspective on college admissions, and I certainly learned a lot from reading it. The last 2 books I want to talk about today are kind of looking at these bigger picture questions of why some students succeed whereas others might fall short, or why certain students who may not have done so well in high school go on to do really well in college, or vice versa, where students that kind of excelled, checked off all the boxes during their high school career seem to kind of flounder once they get to once they start pursuing their college education. So the first book I want to recommend is by Paul Tough. It's called How Children Succeed. And Tough is a contributor for the New York Times. He's a journalist who's spent his career working in education, especially interviewing students in low-income areas, looking at college access programs in the inner city. And he asks a simple question: why do some students succeed where others fail? And Paul Tough looks at these characteristics that we call kind of curiosity, right? So these kind of intrinsic motivational factors that for reasons why students study for exams without being told to, and he looks at this one quality called grit. And grit is this kind of ambiguous, somewhat ambiguous notion that seems to correlate quite strongly with success. Right? It has to do with resilience in the face of circumstances that may be adverse. It looks at kind of students and people who figuratively get back on the horse after they've been knocked off. And he looks at some research by a professor named Angela Duckworth. And Angela Duckworth was actually rewarded a MacArthur Genius Grant a few years ago. And Duckworth dispels with this notion that it's all about talent and it's all about intelligence. And in fact, both Angela Duckworth and Paul Tough agree that it's all about hard work. Like study things, do things outside of the classroom that you're interested in, and try and find those intrinsic motivating factors that make you want to kind of wake up each day and do the things that you enjoy doing. And Professor Duckworth recently published a book literally called Grit, where she the power of passion and perseverance. And she looks at, simply put, why students, adults, athletes, musicians, why some of them kind of continue on to success, whereas others, may have had a very kind of strong start early on, but might have, leveled off over time. And in both these books, How Children Succeed and Duckworth's Grit, I think are extraordinarily interesting because it'll force you to think back on your own life, whether you're a student or an adult, and consider why at certain times you succeeded, why maybe you encountered an obstacle that you couldn't quite overcome. And especially for those of you who have faced adversity or kind of adverse circumstances in your life, it'll encourage you to include these things in your college application essays. And talk about, maybe why you come from a community that doesn't have that many resources, or what it's like to come from a single parent family, or maybe to be the first in your family to attend college, or some of the difficulties you've faced coming from a rural community, or if you've been sick or suffered an injury. Consider this notion of grit and try and incorporate these into your college admissions essays. And at the end of the day, just work hard and continue, trying to pursue your passion, because those are the sorts of things that will keep you, satisfied each day whenever you spend 4 or 5 years in college. Because it's not just about getting in, but it's about finishing college. It's about college completion. And there's so many conversations out there about getting in that, for me, seem to lose this bigger picture of what you want to do, after you turn 18 and graduate from high school. So I hope you enjoyed my book recommendations. As always, feel free to contact me at kevin@texadmissions.com. Thanks, and I hope you have a great day.